For joining us for today's webinar. This is another one of our Ashburn webinar series. We're today doing this at a new time. Thank you everybody for being able to push this back an hour. We had a little scheduling conflict, but I'm glad that all of you are here. My name is Amber Hines and I'm the owner of Ashburn. We work with elder law and estate planning attorneys from across the country to help their clients qualify for Medicaid by using annuities and other types of insurance products that will help their clients accelerate Medicaid eligibility. Today, I'm extremely excited to have attorney Audrey Ehrhardt with us, who is the owner of Practice 42. She's going to be talking about the business side of elder law, how to help grow your practice, manage your practice, and we're just super excited. If anybody has questions after today's session, feel free to type those into the questions tab of the GoToWebinar dashboard, and also a copy of the handouts that Audrey is going to be discussing are in the handouts portion of the GoToWebinar dashboard as well. Thank you, Audrey, and I'll hand everything over to you now.
Thank you, Amber. I'm so appreciative. I'm so used to having to start webinars on my own. I'm just jumping on in, but I want to also deeply echo that sentiment, because thank you, everybody. But the error was totally on my fault. I have a couple of virtual presentations today, and apparently I'm just not as good at time zones as I used to be. So where we are is I appreciate everyone moving forward. And of course, any questions you have as we talk about this, it's such a different conversation, right? When we think of the business side of our elder law practices, and I've been there with you, right? I'm going to my 21st year as an attorney, and I started in estate planning and elder law. Now I'm much more in legal tech, but still very much involved and have a firm in Florida. But what's really important here is that I want you to know this can be an uncomfortable conversation. So however I can help you move forward, have these conversations, that's what I'm here to help you do. We can figure these things out. And I think a lot of times, as opposed to when I'm talking to a personal injury firm or a criminal law firm, or last year I had the privilege of working with an admiralty firm of all things. As we think about those different pieces, a lot of times we have different practice areas that are more focused on profitability, efficiency, AI, than we see in an elder law practice. I mean, I know a lot of y'all are like me. We want to take care of our clients. We want to make sure that they're okay, that they're provided for. We want the hugs, right? And so I know some of you are not in that space, but a lot of us are. And so if it feels uncomfortable, as we talk about the business side, and sometimes it feels a little bit gruff, I don't want you to feel that way. I want you to ask your questions. Let's make this, although, we are muted on the GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar platform, please don't hesitate to write your questions in. I'll save time at the end, and we'll go through that. Now, for those of you I haven't met yet, you can learn all about me, LinkedIn, here, all of those good things. But my name is Audrey Ehrhardt, and I am the CEO and founder of Practice 42. But we're really jumping in today to talk about the business side of growing your practice. And, a lot of times when we think about growth, when we think about that dynamic, we start to have that conversation and we start to panic. We start to worry about the fact, well, if I want to grow, doesn't that mean I'm going to lose my social life? I'm going to lose my nights and weekends. You may also be sitting back right now just going, Audrey, I can't go. I've already lost or grow. I've already lost my nights and weekends. I find a lot of times that, unfortunately, chaos becomes the default in our practice, right? The default is not being successful. It's not being efficient. It's not looking for a smarter way. It almost becomes how to be in survival mode, because unfortunately we are so on fire in our practice and having to take care of constant client demands. And I know your practice area, right? Our clients are not always easy. Our clients have legitimate issues that need us to help them solve, to work through. And so we want to talk about how do we build this practice that you want, so we don't live in the default, which for most firms that I talk to, or most attorneys and most colleagues I talk to, even business owners. I was talking to the gentleman who's helping me remove some trees in my yard just recently, and they were telling me that they're dealing with the challenge of moving from QuickBooks Desktop to QuickBooks Online, and they had a migration specialist who didn't know what they were doing, who did not know what they were doing. And it's the same challenge, right? It's the same thing we deal with in law firms. Have we taken our infrastructure from desktop to online? Do we want to use QuickBooks? All of these things. And I mean, those are things, those issues, the business side of running your practice, that really overloads us. It weighs us down. So we want to think about, how are we going to build this place, this firm that you want to run, that you can succeed in, that you can thrive in, that you can enjoy that benefit of really being there with people and working through that. So as I was preparing for this presentation specifically, the business side of talking about this with you, I wanted to really focus our question on, the first question of what does it mean to be successful today? So I don't want to read these slides to you. We're going to walk through this. We're going to walk through some operational fixes. And then my mother, who is actually our lead copy editor and our chief happiness officer, was pointing out to me about 5 minutes before I got to present this to you, the fact that I actually included 6 operational fixes, but that is me. I can never stop at 3. I just keep on going. So we'll talk about those too. But we want to talk about operational fixes and also what does it mean to be operationally profitable? So as we think about the business side of getting work done, we have to ask that question of, are we operationally profitable? Are we able to run our business within the nexus of how we're getting things done? So getting everything done from the moment someone hires us to afterwards. And then also, as we really drive into that, thinking about that operational profitability, is it costing us more than our retainer agreements and our flat fees to get work done? So we want to talk about that. We're also going to talk about what it means to build a team when we might be in a space where we are consistently moving forward in what feels like chaos. How do we build clarity if we're evolving, if we're adding new software, if we don't really know what we want to be when we grow up or where we're going, or maybe it's time for you to hire in your firm. A lot of times, we're still building, we're still thriving. And I think in some ways, when I talk about that to estate planning attorneys, it makes sense, right? When we're talking about that, we know that side of the law. We know that for our clients, even if they come in and make a will or a trust plan today, it's never over, right? Just because they wanted something when they're 30 doesn't mean they're going to want that when they're 40. Doesn't mean they're going to want that when they're 40 plus one day. So things evolve. And I think it's natural if we can embrace that attitude in our practice, that our practice evolves, that we move forward through that. If we can embrace that side of things, it will ultimately make it easier for you to lead your team with clarity. Because I think sometimes as lawyers, we're best positioned for this. We're trained to be comfortable with the uncomfortable, to be comfortable in the gray space, the gray area. But when we're leading our team, we want to give them as much clarity to do their jobs as possible. And I find for most lawyers, we haven't taken the time because we're not trained this way. We're not trained to build businesses. We're trained to be really great lawyers, and you're great as a lawyer, and I know you are. I have no question about that. But being great as a lawyer doesn't mean that we necessarily know how to run a business in a way that allows us to not feel like we're in chaos mode at all times. So we're going to talk about what that means. We're also going to talk about why working more isn't the answer. And first off, let me just not hide the ball from you. I am a 4 a.m.er. I like to get up at 4 a.m., but it's only since the pandemic. The pandemic came into my household on March 9th of 2020, when about half of our Practice 42 clients came in and said, you know what, we're in states where people were declared not essential, where lawyers were declared not essential. So we had to quickly pivot and figure out how we would help our clients not have to pay those contracts, but also move forward. So at that moment, I just started waking up at 4 a.m. Not really sure why, still hasn't stopped. Sometimes I get lucky and I get to like 6 a.m., so that's exciting. But that being said, I will tell you as the first person who is bad at saying, I'll work more, I want to tell you working more isn't the answer in this space. But whenever I give presentations also, and some of you may have seen me present before, I always have in here at the Gold Bar questions I really want you to be thinking about this as we're thinking about the business side, growing your practice, moving that forward, taking back your weekends, taking back your time. There's actually a really great book I just read. I finished it about 6 months ago called How to Buy Back Your Time. And if you're looking kind of like as a mindset shift to think about that, I'd recommend that book to you, that How to Buy Back Your Time. That might be really helpful. But as we're thinking about that too, as you go through this presentation, I really want you to focus on these questions that you can answer, because when we think about building your business from a structured, strong approach, the question often is why and what are we looking for and how can we do down that? So we're going to talk about that too. And I see this comment that just came in. This is great. I think that is one of the big differences, that we have an EP practice that functions so differently than, I'm assuming when you say EL, the elder law side, when it comes to client needs. I think that's spot on. When we think about that, right? And I don't want to, step too far out of where we're going in this presentation, because we're going to talk about this. You're exactly right. I was working with a firm, at one of the firms I've worked with for years. It was kind of funny. So they're an estate planning and elder law firm, and then the lawyer loves doing traffic tickets. I kid you not, like traffic tickets, this is the lawyer's jam. So we have to give the lawyer 1 day a month to do the traffic tickets. That runs completely differently from estate planning, from elder law, all those different pieces, but it brings the lawyer joy. So we have to create a model that brings you joy. That's the whole point of how we're doing this and what that looks like. But we have to look at those similarities, because where I bring this forward is, we think about that kind of that vertical. I'm a lawyer, you're a lawyer, right? And so we're lawyers. Then we have our practice areas. So if we chose estate planning, criminal law, elder law, guardianship, probate litigation, which is a whole nother animal. So we have those practice areas, and then we have the legal services below that. And that's how we get that work done, from intake through closure, from the moment they hire you with that retainer agreement through the moment that you send that closure letter that says, hey, you'll always be a member of our client family. But at this point, our scope of work is done. And so we're going to be working with you in the future, hopefully. But right now, we'll be contacting you in a different way. So as we think about those legal services, we need to know all those steps, all those bites of the apple, right? So if I'm called, then I'm going to qualify them under my ideal client profile or my client avatar. If they need that, then I'm going to schedule an appointment. If I schedule an appointment, then I send a text reminder. If I send her a text reminder, then I send an email questionnaire. All of those steps that really only you know how to do. So we have to figure out from a business side for the legal services, what are all of those steps, right? And then how much of you has to be in those steps? How much of a team member can be in those steps? How much are those steps an AI employee? And then also, as we have different practice areas, we then have to look for the similarities. So if I'm an estate planning lawyer, if I'm a traffic ticket attorney, if I'm an elder law attorney, where are the similarities? Well, probably everyone has a first phone call, right? Then everyone has an appointment reminder. Everyone has a questionnaire, but that might be dramatically different. So how do we move those things forward? But from a team training side, we want to ask the questions of how can we make it easier on our team to learn to do things the same way every time and move forward. But I want to start with that question. We're already kind of talking about it, but what does it mean to be successful today? And I think that's really important, especially when we talk about the business side of the law practice. And, in law school, as you all know, we're not taught necessarily how to have the business of law. We're taught to be excellent attorneys. And I have no question there that that's something we're focusing on. But we don't necessarily have the business training, the business acumen to make smart decisions so it doesn't feel like we're behind the scenes, like we're behind the curve. And we want to have that structure so we know what to do. So, part of the homework I would give you from this presentation, and some of you know that I'm a big fan of homework and really thinking on things. What do you want? At this point, over 14 years of doing this, I find most firms kind of break into three spots. We really think about what you want. And this is important because we think about building your business. To what end? Why are we building a business? So I bring this up to you. Is the goal one day for you to transition and have a fleet of younger attorneys, maybe not younger in age, but younger in regards to their goals and dreams? So have a fleet of working attorneys, and maybe you're the senior partner and you're looking at that as the goal that one day you want to sell your practice and step out. Are you looking just to do something for the short term? Is this your lifetime practice? What does that look like? So as we start to answer those questions, I find that for most firms, it breaks out into three spaces. First, number one is financial motivation. We've heard this, right? And this could be you. I want to be the $1 million law firm. I find for most folks, when they want to be a $1 million law firm, when they think about what they really want there and we do the calculations, they really want to be a $3 million law firm so they can take home $1 million. So food for thought there. So we have the financial motivation. We have lifestyle motivation. I find a lot of my elder law colleagues, friends, clients are in this space, right? They want to have a life that they enjoy. They may want to not work the whole day on Friday. They might not want to do the 4 a.m. to midnight on a Friday. They may not want to work on their weekends. So we have a lifestyle motivation. So the firm's going to look a little bit different than a financially motivated firm. That's not to say they both can't do that together, but there has to be a plan of where we're going. And then third, I find a lot of times, especially when I'm working with different practice area groups, it's prestige and or advocacy. For most of my elder law attorney groups that I talk to, it's really about the advocacy. You are that person in your community that's making a difference in the lives of seniors, making the difference in the lives of older Americans, sandwich generation caregivers, the disabled in your community, young families, business owners. You are really making that difference. So that advocacy piece is huge here. So we have to figure out, what do you want? Because at the end of the day, building a practice that's sustainable and also going to, first off, do what you want it to do. There's numbers behind there. There's metrics behind that. There's staffing behind that. So as we think about what that looks like, that's really our question as we put this together and figure out how we can really make it the best it can be. But it starts with this homework question of, what do you want? Why are we going to take this idea of the business side of your practice for your elder law firm and really make a difference for you? So that's one of the most important things I can share with you as we get started. I find for most folks, though, it's also the freedom. It's freedom. There's no one way to run a law practice. That's I can tell you that in the iterations of my journey, I can tell you that right now. And if there was, first off, we would all adopt that and we would be wildly successful. If there was just one way to do things, that would be perfect, but there's not. So for most of us, we want the freedom to operate the way we want to, the freedom to do things our way. I find for my solo, small, and mid-sized firms, even in the large firms I work with, where I work with one shareholder or one partner in that vertical, they want to do things their way. And there's a lot of beauty in that. So now we want to put together the structure and the practice area system behind it you can do things the way that you want. And I want to share this with you. This is one of the things I always say. You are the only one who can set this course, no matter what technology we're going to use, no matter what system we're going to use to get there, no matter what structure with calendaring and team members and those different pieces and virtual, not virtual, Windows or Mac, all those different things. You are the one who knows the secret sauce. The magic is in your head. All we have to do is get it out. We have to get it out of your head, and then we have to make it actionable. So going back to that idea of every step for intake through closure, once we know what that is, okay, so I'm going to make a simple will, and I put that in air quotes, right? Because we all know there's no such thing as a simple will. But if I'm going to work on an estate plan, where are the intersections of all those steps of how we're going to get things done that I have to do versus what my team member could do, versus what my AI could do, versus what my software could natively do, also versus what do I not want to do. So we want to start looking at that. And once we start to harness that power of what's in your head and we decide what you really want, and I can't decide for you, but you can, now we can start to put in steps to really make a difference and move that forward. What holds us back, of course, is there's only one you. As recent as my last presentation an hour ago, there is no one who's cloning anybody. Now, if I'm wrong, please tell me. I am actively interested in cloning myself. So if you've heard something, please let me know. But for most of the law firms I talk to, the problem is there's only one you, and you are the bottleneck. I hate to say it that way, but you know everything. You approve everything. You are the one who does everything. And it's hard to peel back that death grip on getting things done, right? But there's only one you. So it's really, really important that we are finding ways to preserve you. I think a lot of times there's no focus on the fact that without you, there's no business. So we have to think about how are we going to really take back your time, make things easier for you, and move that forward. So some food for thought for you there too. Now, when we're starting to think about scaling, when we're starting to think about building the business side, it doesn't have to have scaling, right? If we just want to find a way to hopefully get you out of working every Saturday and every Sunday. And I'll be honest, I'm a big weekend warrior. I mean, I like to be a weekend warrior at work, but I have to discipline myself that it's only one day a weekend because otherwise I burn out, and that's the honest statement. But with that being said, I definitely am a big fan of weekend warriors, so please don't feel I'm bashing weekend work warriors. But with that being said, as we start to look at that, we really need to look at this actionable trifecta. This is something that I have found over the last 7 years is really where the legal tech can come in and make a difference when we're thinking about building systems. Now, you don't have to have legal technology. Let me be completely honest, because you can see my desk right now. Here is my sticky note. Here are my ridiculous, well, this is actually a UPS envelope, but here are all my different pieces of paper. Here's my notebook where I'm taking notes on presentations today. But I can tell you one of my rules to myself and to my team is that I will not leave this space at the end of the day without making sure there is nothing lingering on these pieces of paper. First off, because I lose paper. It's ridiculous. I have a puppy right now that eats every piece of paper I have. But that being said, by eating it, I mean she shreds it. She takes pride in this. Like I got a big box yesterday from Amazon and she shredded it into literally 102 pieces. I mean, why? But that's cool. Whatever makes her happy. With that being said, I mean, I realize there's issues down there. So if you're a really good dog parent, please don't judge. But I bring that up as an example because if I didn't have to use legal tech, I still am old school enough. I remember typing in a law firm that I entered in a person's name into a typewriter will, so back in the old days. But where we are now with legal technology, which is just getting faster and faster and faster and smarter and smarter and smarter, and we have to be real careful of what that looks like for the future. But I bring that up to you because legal tech really can come in and help you take your playbook systems, how you get things done in your practice area, right? So when we think about that, I'm going to do my will, my trust plan. Okay, I'm going to sign, they're going to call me, first meeting, retainer agreement. Now we're going to have the matter management, send drafts to the portal, maybe not, get everything drafted, approve it, come back in for signing, closure, client review, all of those different pieces. The more we can put that, first off, getting it out of that magic out of your head of how do you want that playbook system to be, that's going to be magic. That's how we're going to build this legal team that truly can do what you want them to do. We're going to show them what you want, make it actionable. This is what you do. This is what I do. And then we bring in legal technology to not just create a buddy system in our practice areas, but also to make sure that we have the tools in place so people know what to do each day, so they know how to move forward. So we're able to come in, and if you're not in there for a day, first off, why you're not there, right? But on the flip side of that, if we do have you out for a day, your team knows what to do. We create the SOPs, we create the playbooks, and there's an actionable checklist of what comes next. And then with legal tech, we start to ask more intentional questions. Once we get comfortable there, having the magic out of our heads of how we want our estate planning, elder law practice, probate practice, estate settlement, all of that to run. Once we have that there, then we figure out who does what do you do versus what does a team member do. Now we look at legal tech and say, okay, well, what can be taken off my plate? I mean, I think it's super powerful to have the conversation about the fact that if someone is entering a website contact us form in, that website contact us form is gold. That should be linked to everything else you have. It should be linked to your questionnaire, to your retainer agreement, to the will you're drafting, to the power of attorney, to the matter management, to the billing. If someone's entering in their name that one time, first off, that ability to have that efficiency and reduce the need for you to do data entry is powerful. So it's really important that we want to think about how are we harnessing that information? Are we asking for the right information? And then are we putting together a scalable space, a scalable practice, and also a custom field-based practice that all of this can go where it needs to go, so that your team, whether it's just you as solo, if it's you with 1 or 2 people, they're not, or if it's you with 50,000 people, they're not having to waste time going in and building things that AI could do. As we think about that and we move through that, though, let me kind of take you a step further. You know, I think it goes without saying, right? I'm preaching to the choir, but successful law firms don't happen. You know, you have to put in the work to make it work. You know, a lot of times when I'm working with firms, they've been in a model that was not successful. I don't get the privilege of working with a lot of folks who are just starting off and want to start it off the right way. Every now and then I get somebody, like twice a year. But usually what I'm starting with is someone who is so burnt out on the way their practice has not supported them, they just want to throw in the towel. So at that moment, especially when you're doing the nights and the weekends, we have to give grace to that burnout, right? We have to hear that law is not an easy profession at all. And especially, I think, for estate planning attorneys, but more so for elder law attorneys, and also for probate attorneys, we are working with people who are at the worst point of their lives, right? Especially for our sandwich generation caregivers. Now they're having to place mom or dad or uncle or aunt into a long-term care facility. They don't know what that looks like. They don't know the difference between Medicare and Medicaid. They're terrified that they're going to lose a life savings. You know, if we have a spouse, they're losing their spouse. They're going through this. You know, as a sandwich generation caregiver myself, that's a lot of energy and a lot of bandwidth in your brain. And so we want to have our system be as simple as possible to meet our potential clients where they are, because this is a really tough space to be in. So I want to say that to you. I don't think we should ever judge ourselves in law at all, but especially in this area where our clients' needs are so heavy that we have to make sure we have that in place. When I had my first solo law practice, one of our I mean, I think in today's marketplace, they'd be called ECCs, elder care coordinators, but we had a social worker on staff who really functioned as a Medicaid paralegal. And she was there primarily, we would charge for her services to have her help our seniors gather information they couldn't get at the bank. And I mean, that's 15 years ago. That's back when like banks were more friendly than they are now. So we have to think about, you know, what type of support staff would we have? What do we need? But we had to carve out that position because otherwise our clients couldn't get things done. And I bring that up specifically. I'm also a certified behavioral consultant. I bring that up specifically so we can think about our client avatar and these potential clients and what they need. And those needs directly impact how we're setting up our business model. Because if you are frequently having folks miss deadlines, not turning their Medicaid application information on time, not responding quickly, we have to look at that model and see how we make it more accessible to clients. But at the end of the day, it all goes back to how often do you wish you can clone yourself, and do we need to hire from a space of performance hiring, someone who can take work off your plate and help us move forward for the long term. You know, I don't think I have to preach this one to you, right? But, you know, with this one, you know, we can't work on the practice because we're busy, right? We're so busy, but poor practices happen because we're busy, right? The default of inefficiency, I was going to say inadequacy, that's not it at all, but inefficiency, of chaos, that becomes the norm. And so we have to get our practices, when we're looking to scale out of nights and weekends work, we have to look for intentional solutions that will help us do that. So one of the things I shared in the materials, and if you need help with it, just let me know. I also say to anybody, client or not, I want to hear from you on this. I take this super seriously. It's a tool I've used at Practice 42 for years that I developed called the bottleneck list. And so it's in your resources. You can use it. You're welcome to use it. But these are things I want you to work on this. So this would be homework for you, that, you know, a lot of times the best place to start on how we're going to take back your sanity, get out of chaos, all of those different pieces, we have to ask the question of what is preventing you from moving forward. There are things in your law firm that you have to do. There are things that you absolutely have to do, but there are things you don't have to do. So let me use the example of answering the phone, right? Right now, you may need to answer the phone. Maybe you can't afford somebody to answer your phone. You're getting started, you know, those different pieces, or, you know, you don't find it important. You like to answer your phone. but really answering your phone could most likely be delegated, right? Not the first appointment necessarily, but answering your phone. So if you don't want to answer your phone because it's stopping you from getting out billing, although that could also be delegated, it's stopping you from working on a client matter, it's stopping you from going to court. We want to start to write onto that bottleneck the things that are slowing us down that are not something that only we can do. But that's a really important question here. Is it something that only you can do? So as we think about this, these are not the things that only you can do. So when I think about, big things I'm working on or next step things I'm working on, those are things that only I can do. But answering my phone, taking out my garbage, making sure that my calendar is scheduled, those are things that I can delegate with actionable training. So for your bottleneck list, as you use this really important tool, and I would encourage you to use it daily for at least 14, if not 21 days, you write that down. I don't want to answer my phone. Okay, so that's not because you're coming in there and you're going to write it over and over again every time the phone rings. That's a little bit insane. I get that. I've done that though. With that being said though, you want to put a check mark. So how many times does it happen per day? How many times does it happen per week? How many times does it happen over the 21 days? I find, and this is, with all the hiring I do and things like that, when I look at this, when I find once we get over 7 checks there, that usually is a sign that now we have our first duty and responsibility for a new hire. So I find a lot of times in hiring, unfortunately, as lawyers, we hire what we think we should have as opposed to what we really need. So the bottleneck list starts our intentional hiring system. And sometimes it's not a hiring system at all. Sometimes it's actually coming in from a place and saying, you know what, I actually need a smarter software. I need to think about how to move this forward. I need a different system for how we're going to do this. But, as far as for those of you who really want to make a difference in your practice and change it, I would highly recommend that we work at this. It's going to be such an important piece in our practice for us to move forward and for us to figure out how we're going to make a difference in our firms. As we go from there, when we think about moving out of this, and I shared this with Amber and Stuart yesterday, we want to, or today, I can't remember, we want to shift from chaos to a sustainable method. One of our most popular ebooks that we give away here at Practice 42 is how to harness the chaos in your firm, how to go from chaos to clarity and really asking intentional questions. So we have a workbook that I encourage all of you to use and use it at your own pace, figure that out. But, we really have to figure out, how are we going to get to a practice area system that delivers the results and the success as we define them? So again, you're defining that success, and what it looks like for you may be very different from what it looks like for me. But then we're going to be putting this practice area system in place to really get those results for us, time over time, and looking at that. As we think about a practice area system, right? Again, you're a lawyer, practice areas, and now we have our legal services. I'd encourage you to think about your practice in 3 distinct ways. One is pre-hire. So everything that happens before they sign the retainer agreement, that's intake. So in pre-hire and intake, how is your system there? So do we have all of, like, to use the Tootsie Pop owl, the 3 bites to the Tootsie Pop, 1, 2, 3, and the bites, and the kids are all upset from the 80s. As we think about that cartoon, do we have all of that mapped out? How do people find you? Do they get questionnaires? Is there a first appointment? Do they make first payment? What does that look like? That's really phase 1, everything up until contract. Contract signed, retainer agreement, engagement agreement. Now we're off to the races for active case, getting that work done. So what are all those steps in the matter management? Where can we find similarities between our practice areas so our team is not having to learn a different process for each different practice area or each different legal service, or maybe they need to? Where do we see similarities? Where do we see differences? And then after we send that closure letter, normally required by our malpractice carrier, to say, hey, scope of work is closed. Now, if you need me in the future, I'm here for you. Now you're a member of my client family, off to the races, because now we're going to go to closure, and we're actually going to turn to your post-closure process, where we're saying to the person on your firm who's in charge of scanning, closing, all of those things, and then equally importantly, getting that review so you can move forward and continue to work with folks as we go forward. So those are really the 3 phases I'd encourage you to think about. Now, the heart of our presentation today on the business side of growing things, we want to talk about our 3 operational fixes, but then I hate to say it to you, there's really 6. But who hates free information, right? But I couldn't stop when I was working on this one, because first off, I love Amber and I love Ashbar and everything it does. So honestly, if you're not working with her, I'll do a shameless plug. If I was still in a place where I needed this in my firm, that she would be my right hand go-to. So with that being said, I'm glad you're here with her. But as we work through this and think about this, what are operational fixes? And let's jump into this. So operational fix number 1. Know what your firm costs you each day to run. I am always shocked to know that lawyers don't know this. I know down to the 10-minute increment what my businesses cost me to run. You have to know that. We can't make growth moves if we don't know what we're working against. And so I would encourage you, if nothing else today, this weekend, the weekend that you don't want to spend, you have to drive in and know what your operational costs are. We can't price appropriately. We can't charge appropriately. We can't add in extra fees appropriately for ourselves, not even talking about in your community, without knowing what things cost. So I would encourage you, this is just the start of a list that I work on with with my clients, and I talk to them about, because, a lot of times people are surprised by annual costs. We should be planning for that year over year. We need to have at least 3 months of savings. If you have startup costs, how are we reimbursing that? So we want to think about all of this. So operational fixed one, if you want to really get into the nitty gritty of taking back your time, we have to know what you're spending money on and what that looks like. That's really key here. And that becomes the basis of our operational budget. So what does that mean? So the base of our operational budget is the harnessing of our practice area. It's all fine and dandy for me to say, oh, I charge $5 for a will. That's great. Remember, when we have those clients who will come and be like, my grandparents paid $5 for a will back in 1917. That's great. So with that being said, as we put that together, we have to know actually what does it cost. So if I'm going to meet with someone, if I'm going to have my intake system to bring you in, now I'm going to meet with someone for a first appointment. Now I'm going to have all of our automation, all those pieces in there. Now I've got a paralegal to help me draft. I've got closure. I've got the portal. I've got my case management software. We have to know the actual dollar that it costs to run our firm each day. And that becomes our operational budget. So our operational budget is where we start. So let's say it is $5. I need $5 a month to run my firm. Fantastic. So now we know that. So now we have our operational budget. That's the nugget that we have to meet. And I will tell you right now, that should be everything you need to pay for, plus a base salary for you. I get right off the bat, I don't want to hide the ball from you. There's a lot of if you're not paying yourself, and as someone who frequently doesn't pay themselves to reinvest into the business with different things, you have to pay yourself something, because otherwise over time, there's actually a lot of studies that show that that's very demotivating. So even if you pay yourself $5, you have to get something out there so you can feel like you have some return on investment. We start with our operational budget, then we go to our growth budget. Okay, so I have $5, have to have that. Now, if I made $10 with my growth budget, now I could have another team member. I could have a different software. I could do this marketing. So we have our growth budget. So what's our next step? Now, once we get to 90 days with our operational budget, now at this new number, so we started at 5, have to have that, but now we're at $10. Once we're there for 90 days, and I would encourage you to always look at quarterly billing as opposed to monthly billing. Monthly billing can be deceptive, especially in our practice area. With that being said, though, once we get to that $10 after 90 days, that number now becomes our operational budget, because we're achieving that over 90 days. And then, of course, we want number 3, our profit budget. What is that number that's going to make you happy? And you may not have a number. Instead, for you, it might be represented as time off, those types of things. That still is a number. But as we put that together, you want to think about, what does your first firm cost you each day? And then what are the benchmarks for how we're going to reach your goals for hiring more, for offering new services to move that forward in your practice? So that's my number 1 operational fix for you. So number 2, we want to think about, what does your team really cost you? So a lot of times I'll talk to somebody and they'll say, oh, I'm going to hire a new person. It's going to be $36,000 a year. Simple. I can work that in. I have $36,000 a year. Hiring someone for $36,000 a year sounds great, but they may not actually cost us $36,000. So I have to ask you a couple of questions here. So again, we're thinking about operational fixes. So first off, do you know the number you need to bring in every day? There's 365 days in a year. Sometimes there's 366. What's the number you need every day? And are we making it over the quarter? So there's that. Number 2, what does your legal team cost you? You can't guess on this one. We have to know down to the penny. What does your legal team cost you every day? And then you want to make sure that you are getting a true 3-to-1. This is a big, big one for me. I mean, I talk to folks every day about, do they have the right team? Do they have the right staff? Do we have the right AI? Do we have the right technology? Do we have the right practice area? But as we think about this, our employees should earn us a true 3-to-1. So if we're going to hire someone for $5, right? We needed $5. That was our operational budget. Now, if we just had $5 more, our strategy budget, we could hire a paralegal. So that paralegal, if we're going to pay them $5, needs to earn us back $20. Okay, hear this with me. Hiring people, associates, team members, marketers, that should make you money. Everything you do should have a minimum of a true 3-to-1 on investment. And I am, at the end of the day, a profitability mapping coach. So I want you to know that. I mean, I deeply feel that law is about advocacy, but if we can't pay your bills, you can't advocate for more people. And this is a really big thing that I take it to heart, that we have to make sure you have the best infrastructure set up possible. I find a lot of folks don't really understand what that 3-to-1 means. So a lot of times people think, well, if it's $5 and the person has to earn me back their salary of $5, or let's say it's more simple, 40,000 a year, 40,000 a year, 40,000 times 3 is 120. I would challenge you that that's not a true 3-to-1. That is 3-to-1, but you really need to be coming to a 4-to-1. So 4-to-1. So if we're paying 40,000, they should earn you 160,000. This is operational profitability. And so first off, they're reimbursing you for hiring, for that you hiring them and taking a chance on them. Then they're paying a third of admin, a third marketing, and a third is profit for you. So that's what we need to be tracking in our case management software, in our billing system, whatever that looks like, however you do that. I will tell you, I do this quite a bit. And so with that being said, once our employees, then you think about how much do our employees need to work? What are the numbers? We need all of our employees to be tracking at least 30 hours a week, 48 weeks out of the year. So you might say, well, Audrey, there's not 48 weeks in the year, there's 52. And I hear you, there's absolutely 52 weeks in the year. But I find a lot of times we shoot ourselves in the foot and we get bad numbers if we think about that. Because in a perfect world, we get 8 hours of billable time out of everybody every day, 52 weeks out of the year. But first off, chances are we're really going to get like 5 or 6 hours out of people a day, because there's other things that happen. People have to eat lunch. People have to move around. They have to make calls. They have to do admin things. So we can track all of that, right? But I figure if we get 5 to 6 hours trackable time, we are above the curve. Actually, you are above the curve. You're actually in the top 20% of law firms who are getting actionable reports on what's being done in their legal services. With that being said, the moment that's, and then why 48 weeks instead of 52? First off, there's usually 2 weeks of federal holidays, and then usually most firms I work with, if they don't do the UVP, unlimited vacation policy, then they're doing about 2 weeks of vacation. So I feel if you track your metrics on your employee with a 52-week year, you're already shooting yourself in the foot. So we want to make sure we're mapping 30 hours a week, 48-week year, so about 1440 in billable hours. So the moment that we get to that magic number of where our employees are at 31 or more hours per week, that's usually a trigger that we can find on building our business out of our firm, that maybe it's about time to hire that next person. We could track the same thing for you. If you're putting in 60, 30, 50 hours a week, 100 hours a week, it is time to start cloning you and finding out how we can figure out that next person to take some of those responsibilities off of you over time. So as we put that together, what do we track? When it comes to operational profitability and how we fix the business side of our practice, I find, most of us think in terms of salary, right? We're not necessarily numbers people in law. I mean, we are, but that's not necessarily our background. But salary, health, retirement contributions, insurance, all insurance, office equipment, subscriptions and licenses, reimbursable expenses, and bonuses. So these are the things I would say to you, you need to be tracking at a minimum. These are all the things that add into the person's salary. So let me kind of share Ron with you. So we think about Ron here, right? Salary, 60,000, health, retirement contributions, insurance, all insurance, office equipment, subscriptions and licenses, reimbursable expenses. So we start to break that down, right? So we start to break this down on the right side. This is where we get to. So although we offered Ron $60,000, we're probably going to end up paying Ron more about $77,000. So as opposed to $5,000 a month, it's going to be more like $6,485. Most firms I work with have never done this deep dive. They also haven't thought about reassigning the cost of subscriptions to their employees or office equipment to their employees. You have to do those things. I mean, without these software subscriptions, we can't often be able to move forward in the most efficient way possible. So just kind of some food for thought here. These are what we want to be thinking about and how we move that forward. And then I also encourage you to plan forward now for bonuses, because that's something that employees expect. It makes you more competitive. And if we know what we're getting into at the start of the year, it will make the end of the year a lot easier, unless you're doing quarterly bonuses, and that's a different conversation. So as we think about that, how does Ron help us? Because I know some of you are probably sitting here going, Audrey, I'm a flat fee firm. I don't understand how to track profitability. I don't understand the hourly rates. I completely hear you, and I don't want to ever take you out of flat fee charging. My preference is flat fee charging, but we still have to know how long things take. So we think about that, right? So if I'm going to do a first appointment meeting, that's probably going to be an hour. Before that, my intake specialist maybe had half an hour invested with this client. We had an intake software that we used. I met with them for an hour. Now we've got our drafting software. Now we have the drafter. Now we have our matter management. So we have to put a cost to all of those things, so we know if we're pricing appropriately. A lot of times when I'm talking to lawyers, they'll say, well, Audrey, I'm charging because this is our industry standard or this is our community standard. Great. But if the community standard or industry standard is out of whack with what you need in your operational budget, then we have a problem. And I'm not talking about making a jump of like a $2,000 document to $15,000. I'm talking about moving the ball more small in the sense of maybe it's $2,025 now to make sure that we're not losing money in that space. So working through this equation here, though, for Ron at 70,820, which is the true number there, now we're thinking about his 3-to-1. So we know what he has to work on a 50-week month. Now we think 30 hours a week. So we're starting to think of what his hourly rate should be. This is how we start to put the numbers and the magic together. However, a true 3-to-1 for Ron is 311,000, which means his hourly work needs to be $207.52. So I know this is a lot to take in, kind of if you've never seen this before, but this is where we start to get into performance and figuring out how to make sure we're taking back your time so you're able to hire for what you need in your firm to become more efficient, and make sure also that you can still cover all of your operational expenses and then have a forward strategy for hiring, and then ideally getting you out of working late nights and weekends while still growing and still being able to scale. So the next one, even though, because I know I was supposed to I was not supposed to, but I was only going to do 3, but I kept on going. This number 3, have more client meetings. So I know right now you're going to say, Audrey, I have no idea why I'd have more client meetings if I have no time. But I really think this is an important step that I think most lawyers miss out on. Having more client meetings, even one of my favorite things to do is having a catch-all block every other day or twice a week. Here is my 10-minute increment meetings. Okay, someone has to talk to me for talking to me. It's not going to be email. It's not going to be talking to a team member. This is a strong, quick question, or one quick question, eliminating the one quick question. It's, look, if you really have a question that hasn't been answered till now, you can talk to Audrey on Friday between 4 and 5. It's going to be a 10-minute call. Do you want 4, 4:10, 4:20, 4:30? And we break that out. Because this is really important. We have to give our potential new client a really clear path. First off, if we haven't been hired, and then our client a clear path as we move forward. So this is going to be a really powerful strategy for you. I also will tell you, don't leave your first meeting, especially in the Medicaid practice area, with like, get back to me whenever, like more vague. We want to have a really clear path. And I found over the last, 9 years at this point, almost 10 years, our 10th birthday is coming up in October. But with that being said, really a 3-part strategy, especially for elder law firms, is, look, I know you have questions, but there's 3 ways to go. You can fire me now to take care of this, great. Don't hire me, and you can send a closure letter saying come back at any time. Or if they're going to have questions going forward, and I find most elder law attorneys lose space here, or lose time here and spaces, which is why I bring it up. Let's go ahead and set a paid meeting for a week from now, 2 weeks now, for 15 minutes in that time block, so you can answer those questions and kind of move that forward. I know it seems counterintuitive, but this is really important as we move through that. Number 4, because I added way too many, don't price with your feelings. That's it. Like, there's no slide for that. Like, don't price with your feelings. You need to have your price list, know what you charge, know what this looks like, and then so you can truly get that 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 on your practice. Don't price with your feelings. You know what you charge. You know what the minimum is. Everything we do, people don't come to lawyers when things are happy or when things are easy. People come to lawyers when things are tough. So we have to figure out what your prices are, and then we have to stick them. So in all honesty, and if you can't price, we need to bring someone in who can price in your firm. Number 5, stop emailing like it's a phone call. I did a study here at Practice 42 last year, so in 24, and asked my clients who participated, not everybody did, of how much time they spent emailing. 20 hours was the top, and the median, so not the median, the top was 48 hours. 20 hours every 2 weeks was the average. That was the median. That is terrifying. That's a lot of unbilled, wasted time, especially on flat fee cases. So very important that we are not emailing with clients as if it's a phone call. There are a lot of generational statistics now that a lot of folks consider email a phone call. So you say something, someone says something back, someone says something back and forth. It's not efficient. And we have to have an email management policy within your engagement agreement to make sure we're in a good space. Your email response time should be a communication block on your calendar. You don't need to be in email constantly. If you don't have the luxury of having someone who can help watch your email for emergencies, then you have to have a routine schedule to manage your email. So really important here. And in your email communication, if it's more than 5 minutes, it needs to be billed. And if it needs to be billed, then we ask the question of, how does our flat fee absorb this? Or is it a one-off bill? So we have to think about, what does this look like, and how do we move that forward and have our email ground rules as we go from there. As we keep on going, so this is number 6, because I kept on going. We also want to eliminate redundancy and errors with your AI employee. And unfortunately, I see a lot of folks who just are not leaning into this yet. And I think it's really important as we go down this path, because we are in a space now that AI is, first off, massively outpacing the level that folks can stay on top of it. I was reading an article this morning at 4 from Forbes, and they were sharing about the new iPhone update where Chrome, if you have Chrome on your iPhone, and you might have seen this over the last 24 hours, where Chrome is trying to remove the Safari permissions on iPhone, and Chrome is trying to remove the Bing permissions on Android. So it's very interesting to kind of watch that come out, because what it's preparing for, if you don't know this yet, and it's something to be on the lookout for, we're going to have an AI search engine, hopefully not until next year. I think it's going to be probably now. My gut says, especially seeing that article today, it may be by the end of the year. So what does that mean? That means there'll be something new. Who knows who's going to put it out, because a couple different companies are working on it, but there will be a search engine specifically AI driven. So is your marketing, is your law firm, is your law practice, is your phone system, are you prepared for that, right? Have you had that conversation with your marketer? As someone who does in my company quite a bit of lawyer marketing, this is a conversation to be having now. So if you are not regularly showing up in AI searches, this is a huge problem. And of course, that usually leads to the question of what on earth is an AI search? But this is just something we need to be on top of. But even beyond that level of search, we want to make sure that we're setting up a space to eliminate redundancy and errors. Again, I want my potential new client to fill out their name and their address and their phone number and their website, all of those different pieces, not their website, their email. And I want all of that to chain throughout any document. I want them to take the ownership in that client management space. For those of you who have issues with getting information from your Medicaid clients timely, this is a great move, because you can help them partner with you and understand the value of moving things forward, but you're also taking back your time because you're not entering things in over and over and over again. So a couple of the high top things here: intake, it's usually communication, questionnaires, retainer agreements and billing, time tracking and reporting. In matter management, it's usually drafting, communication, billing, and then the closure process and the after marketing is kind of food for thought there. Here also, because part of this also, I have a lot of folks who say to me, first off, this is overwhelming. How do we start to think about how we're going to work through this and not have chaos? But as we think about this, what do you need to implement so that you are leading with clarity? I think that's so important about how do we lead from clarity. I mean, number one, let me just read these to you, and I don't like to read slides, but number one is know what you want and what you don't. That's really important. What type of client do I want to work with? Who is my client avatar? I know for me in my law firm, it was I wanted to work with seniors. Senior is someone who's over the age of 75, has over $1 million, has a house to protect, has grandkids, kids they want to leave a legacy to. If they didn't fit that, then they were a tier 2 client. Okay, so now and they had a spouse, because I wanted to do planning for spouses. Tier 2 client. Okay, now I'll work with a single person, a sandwich generation caregiver, but the single person has to have a business. Otherwise, there's no skin in the game, and I don't really want to work with them. Tier 3 client, someone who is not those things. So, am I going to work with them? How is that going to structure, and what does that look like? Number 2, understand priority. Now, tomorrow, never. You have to understand priority, and you have to be able to teach that to your team. Not everything that comes in every day is a priority. It is hard to teach team members priority, but we have to do that triage. And a lot of times priority comes with becoming seasoned in your role. But if someone's asking me for a copy of a drafted document that we worked on a year ago and they never responded back, that's probably not a priority versus someone who I need to get the information by the end of the day today at 5 for a Medicaid application, and I've been talking to them and they've been delivering every time I ask a question. Number 3, you want to build a buddy system that doesn't include you. When we have the luxury to have more than one employee, we want to start to build teams in our employee structure so that they can work together to come up in that place together and work on those things. Number 4, have more team meetings. I'm a big fan of team meetings. I think team meetings are one of the most underutilized tools in law firm management. More team meetings that you can allow your employees to tether to we use a specific methodology of a 2-part team meeting every day. That's a really important part of this, because your team needs to be able to say to a potential client, to anyone they're talking to another team member, you know what, I can't speak to Audrey right now, but I have a meeting with her at 4:15 today, and I will have you an answer by tomorrow morning before 10 a.m. You want to have that tethered in, and if your team learns that priority, then they can give that confident feedback to your client and move that forward. And then number 5, I'll tell you, this used to be four steps here, but number 5, I've added this one this year, which is, don't move the ball in a project. I'm notorious for doing this. We'll get something done. It's like, yes, and we should just celebrate, right? But I'm a ball mover. So then I'll be like, we accomplished this and we're so awesome. But what if we just did this one other thing? Don't do that. There are a lot of studies on this that actually demotivates your team. So to think about what that looks like and how we move that forward. Let me also share with you, these are my 5 golden rules. So I want to share this with you too. As we're looking at your practice area systems, how we're taking you out of chaos, what that looks like, I have to tell you, as we look at this, with every task you have on your plate now, I would encourage you to ask 5 questions. So with anything you have to do, right? When we think about the bottleneck list, as we think about how you want to grow your firm and take back your weekends, we have to ask the question of, is it you? If you're looking at this task in front of you, like today, presenting this webinar, is it me? Yes, this is me. So if it's me, yes, but maybe it wasn't. Maybe it's not me. So answering my phone today, that's not me. So is it me? No. Is it an attorney on your team? Is it yes or no? So if it's not an attorney, if it's still no, then we go to number 3. Is it a legal team member? So this is someone who has historical knowledge of your practice. This is someone who has special training, someone who needs to know something about the legal case, the law, okay? If the answer still is no, so number 4, is it an admin team member? So this is someone who doesn't really have any special training, but they're in your firm, they have a role. We have to ask for that, is it yes or no for this task? Because if the answer is no, if the admin team member really doesn't have to do it, just someone has to do it, then we have to ask the question of, can your AI do it, right? Legal technology, again, rapidly evolving, rapidly moving forward. So how are we able to harness what works for you? What does that look like? And how do we make that happen? Okay, let me give you just a couple more things here, and then we'll have some time for questions if you want to. I want to just say, a big part of this in preparing for this, a lot of times, again, we're working nights and weekends, and we're thinking if I could just work harder, then I would get wherever I'm going, right? I'd have more money, I'd be more successful, things will get better. But I find that working more is really never the answer. Instead, it's being about really intentional. So one of the key strategies I work on, there's about 12 that I work on, but one of the key ones here that I thought was really relevant for this presentation was we have to stack your calendar for profitability. I find a lot of times when I'm talking to, especially elder law and estate planning firms, what are we great at? We are great at crisis Medicaid planning, right? We can get people benefits, they're gonna be thrilled, but we might be hearing from them on the 5th of the month and we've gotta be done by the 20th. Now that's me because I'm a psycho in that space. I don't like to wait longer than the 20th because then I feel like things go sideways. But that's a really short window to do a really heavy lift of work. And if I want that to come in, that person coming into me on October 5th coming up, if I want that case to come in, I have to have time on my calendar on October 5th for them to come in. But what do we typically do in our firms? We set time as people call in, right? So someone calls in, I need a will, great, you're on October 5th. I need a will, great, you're on October 5th. I need a business plan, okay, you're on October 5th. I need, a trust administration, okay, you're on October 5th. So now when the October 5th Medicaid comes, you can't see them for a month. Does that sound familiar? So we have to think about how do we stack your calendar to reflect the operational profitability that you need to run your firm and get paid, right? And have the money to run your firm, have your money to go to your strategy number, and then ultimately to your big profit number. But as we scale, we have to have enough time to bring in the work we want to work with. We can't let our calendar happen to you. And I find a lot of times that's what happens. So let me kind of talk to you through this process. So, this is one of my big takeaways for you here. We want to be structured in 3 ways. Our calendar should be structured always for advocacy for your potential new client. Who do you want to be helping? What do you want to be doing? Then number 2, your immediate earning potential. So they're sitting across from you. What can we earn right there? Because you're always advocating. You're going to be advocating for this person. But now what is the immediate earning potential versus what's the long-term profitability? So what does that mean? In my practice, when I had my first solo practice, I ended up selling in elder law. I did require everything to be, the amount to be paid up front. So if we were charging $10 for a Medicaid plan, it had to be paid in full on that day, and then we billed against it. That was just how I practiced. Most firms at this point don't do that, right? They take a deposit, and then there's times to refresh the deposit, and then or they take half up front, half later. So that's what I mean by immediate earning versus long-term profitability. So we may get paid today, but then the second half of that may be coming in 30 days, or in our Medicaid example, by the 20th. Let me walk this through. So let me give you this example, which I know is kind of a big hit, but I want to share this with you because when we're thinking about how we're going to get you finally to where you want to be, this is really, really crucial. So let's say that our operational budget was $10,000. I need $10,000 to run my firm, pay myself a base salary. That's what I need. Okay. So legal service 1, when we're hired, we're paid, immediately earns $500, and then we are paid $500 upon the completion of that work. So 2 appointments on your calendar. Okay. Legal service 2 immediately earns $1,000, and then $3,000 in 3 months, 2 appointments total. Okay, so we're thinking about how we're blocking your calendar because we're blocking this when the people come in and they schedule. Legal service 3 earns immediately $2,000. This is our premier service in our client avatar model, and then $4,000 within 30 days. So obviously that's what we're thinking through. So with these variables, now we keep on going, right? So as we think about this, let's make some rules. Okay, so we only want to have 10 appointment slots per week. So 2 a day, or maybe you have 3 a day, 1 on another day. 30 appointment spots per month, because we have 1 week that we are not working. We are just doing client work, right? This is my ideal. This is how I like to see my firms work. Three weeks of heavy intake production, 1 week for getting work done. And let's say we are not that great at closure. So we have a 50% closure rate. So now we're thinking about this. So again, legal service 1 earns $500 upon completion, and then we get another $500 in a month, in 45 days. So if we have 4 of these appointments per week, 8 per month, we have a $4,000 base, but our next month projection of our $10,000 that we need is already up $4,000. So next month we only need $6,000. Legal service 2 earns immediately $1,000, $3,000 in 3 months. Okay, so we get 2 per week, but we only get $1,000 because we're at a 50% closure rate. We have 4 of these per month, so $4,000. But now in 3 months we have $12,000. We're already ahead of our profitability goal. Okay. Legal service 3, we earn $2,000 right now, $4,000 within 30 days. So now we still have our 50% closure rate, but now our base is 8,000, but stacked into these other appointments, we're seeing now our base is 20,000. And in the same month with the right type of case, now we're at 36,000. So our $10,000 goal with the right calendar methodology and our operational profitability became 36,000. And then we still hold back 2 appointments per week for closed cases. So very important there too. Okay. So as we keep on going down this path, I wanted to give you some more examples here so you could work through this and you would be able to see this on your own side. I think I didn't switch the slide. Sorry about that. It didn't move forward. So why does this matter? So let's put this together from an operational profitability stage, right? Because we were also talking about Ron and what we had to pay him too. So now we have to think about how much, so legal service 1 specifically, how long does it take to get it done, right? How many hours does it take each team member? So thinking about Ron, in our earlier example, we were hiring him for $60,000. So let's say on average, he's working 6 hours a day for us. That's our 30-hour work week. Okay. That means this, and let's say the service takes 5 hours. That means your employee is able to come in and take on work for you. So he can take on 6 cases a week. And that means you can take on 6 cases a week. Remember that moment in Scrooge where he says to his assistant, why aren't you working late? And she's like, I'm not working late today. He's like, if you don't work late, I can't work late. That's kind of this idea here. But that being said, now he can take on 6 cases per week. So if you can, this is how we start to scale. So if we have 24 intakes a month, 12 clients, because we have a 50% closure rate in the first month, now we've got 12,000. Now we're also setting up the next 48 weeks. This is how we're going to pay Ron and how he's going to make us money. I know I'm moving through this quickly because we're at the end of our time, but if you want to do a deeper dive on this, I would love to help you better understand this, and you'll also have my slides to look at. But of course, let's kind of round this up and we'll do some questions too, because there's some in here. You know, successful firms don't happen because you are super busy practicing law. So that I want you to know, like, I mean, I completely hear it. We just need to get you out of a space where you're in chaos. We can actually build the business side of your law firm. So, and you don't feel bad about this. You're always like you're already doing a fantastic job. You're here, you're investing in your practice. So now we just have to figure out how we're going to make it a little bit easier with a business blueprint to make it easier for you. And Amber, this is me. These are kind of my these are my thoughts here, and we can have some time for questions if that works for you too.
Awesome. Yes, we do have a couple of questions here. One of the questions is, can you explain the client avatar?
Sure. So client avatar, and 20 years ago when I kind of started, or 14 years ago when I started speaking in this area, we would say ideal client. So when people will say like your A, B, C, D client, I find now things are so technologically minded. We not only want to have our ideal client, so who's going to hire you for your services. Our client avatar is when we really get into the demographics. This is where they're shopping. This is what their industry is. This is what they're searching for online. So this is more of the marketing side of this. We really have to have a handle on not just who we want to work with, but then what are all the pieces of where they are looking for you so that we can meet that intersection. So you need to be working with your marketer to be able to have that understanding. For example, a sandwich generation caregiver is going to be on Pinterest. They're going to be ideally on LinkedIn if they have a job. They're going to be on Facebook Business, but they're not going to be on Twitter. They're not, or X. They're not going to be on TikTok most likely. Now, if we have someone who's below that number of 44 and below, that's where they are. So how are we setting up our client avatar to match what we want, but then also be in the right channel?
Okay, great. And then another question is, what do you recommend when a client calls back 3 or 4 years later with questions? Situation has changed. We recommend a new initial, but some clients seem frustrated with with this, what do you do when clients are circling back with questions years later?
That's a great question. So a couple of things. So first off, my first question would be, it sounds like you don't have a client maintenance plan. Okay. If you have a lot of those questions and it's happening frequently, we have to ask, first off, why are they asking that question? And if they are questions that just come up normally, I have, someone's gotten married, someone's gotten divorced, I have aging issues, those issues that come from aging, the long-term care process, I have a business. We may have enough factors there where we want to create a client maintenance plan. And I think that's really important for us to look at there. Number two, we want to have some sort of, if we don't have a client maintenance plan, you need to have some sort of annual trigger or annual program for marketing with your clients so they know how to ask you those questions. So I'd ask you if you're doing that. So this could be an end of the year update, a start of the year update, a birthday card, a holiday card, something where we say, what, we're always here, we're always in your corner. If you need us, this is how you reach out. And then also we would have that piece and that would tell them what to do. In this space, because I know clients can be sensitive, I usually so I would ask first, we're really diving into this. My first question would be, of those people who come in, free consultation or not, is it generating a new business? So if let's say you get 10 calls like that in a month, and I have firms that's happened too. If only one of those is ready to move forward with a new service, then we probably want to pay for that consultation, okay? However, if 9 out of 10 of those people are hiring either for long-term care planning or an updated estate plan, then we might want to think about how do we get them into that 10-minute block for you to say, you know what, Audrey's not available until Friday from 12 to 1. I'm going to go ahead and grab for 12:20 to 12:30 spot for you because you are a priority. Tell me as much as you can so she can be ready for this conversation. So ideally, you're coming in there, 10-minute consultation, and you're selling them on, not selling, selling is true, but you're getting them invested in a new service so you can advocate for them. Now, on the flip side, if we go back and you're seeing the numbers skewing more the other way of not only do they not want to pay you for the consultation, but they also don't want to pay you for doing more work, then that might not be we might want to charge for that consultation then because it can be more of a gatekeeper, but then people get frustrated and I get that. I think the other part of that too is how are we interacting with them? Like, is it that you haven't heard from them in the past? How did we leave it with them? What was the closure letter? What did it say? What were their expectations? So it might say, you know what, if you haven't hired us to be part of our annual maintenance plan and moving that forward, if you call back and need help, not to worry, I'll give you a free 15-minute consultation. But on the flip side of that, if you need longer, I'm going to charge you X. It's not going to be my full hourly rate because you're a client, but I am going to charge you this going forward, and asterisk, I reserve the right to move this forward every year or move this higher every year. Sorry, that's a lot of a brain dump. I'm more than happy to talk to you about that too if you need some help there.
Awesome. Well, we kept it at almost an hour. Those were all the questions. I really appreciate your presentation, Audrey. I know everybody else did too. So thank you and take care.
Thank you, Amber. Talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.